Carbs make you fat. Cut carbs to get shredded. Don't eat fruit. It has sugar in it. That's what you hear online, right? You hear it from your coaches, especially if you're an athlete trying to lean out. But here's the problem. You are not a bodybuilder stepping on stage. You are not a middle-aged man trying to lose weight who sits at a desk all day. You're an athlete trying to perform. In this episode, I'm going to be breaking down why cutting carbs doesn't work for most athletes, especially when you're in season or training hard, and how it can actually slow your progress, even if you look leaner for a moment. So let's get into it. Let's start with why carbs get a bad reputation. This carb phobia, a lot of it came from early 2000s with Atkins diet, the keto diet, everyone trying to make carbs the enemy, just based on a couple research studies. And a lot of it too comes from the bodybuilding culture. You know, I've got nothing against bodybuilders, but let's be real, bodybuilders compete based on how they look. Athletes compete based on how they perform. So that is a massive difference when we talk about how you show up, how you look, how you fuel. Is what is your goal? Is your goal just to look good? Or is your goal to perform? Now, again, we toss in the keto diets or the other low carb diets that have been promoted in the general population. And suddenly athletes, people who are burning 2,000 to 4,000 or more calories in a day, are trying to eat like sedentary adults who sit at a desk all day. Maybe they work out a few hours a week. You know, again, these are very different humans that we are speaking about. Athletes, you guys are training 5-6 days a week. You guys are maybe training 2 hours plus a day. Right now, I'm looking at O'Day High School training over at this other football field, and they're doing 2-a-days right now. Imagine doing 2-a-days without any carbs in you, with just protein and fats. It's going to be a freaking exhausting day. Versus the adult who's probably telling you this, who maybe works out 3 or 4 times a week for an hour at most, and doesn't have anybody tracking them, doesn't have anybody monitoring them in terms of how well they're performing, making sure they're getting from one line to another fast enough. They're not being scrutinized by every little detail of how they perform. Their performance is based on what they do at a desk or what they do on a sideline. Their performance is not based on how they perform on a field or on a court. So remember that when you have a coach or a parent or whoever telling you to cut out carbs. Now, some guys with abs on TikTok, they're going to be like, cut carbs to get shredded, you know, cut carbs to look a certain way, to have a six pack, etc. And it feels convincing. You know, you see the athlete, or you see, not even an athlete, you see that person and you're like, man, they're shredded. Like, I want to look like that. But here's the reality. The shredded look is temporary. What you're seeing is water loss, not simply fat loss. It's getting them in the perfect light. It's getting a little bit of, maybe even a little bit of editing to make them look a certain way. It's temporary. You know, there's so many photos online showing how somebody will look all gimmied up, all dressed up, versus when what really is going on, and you see all these hidden things. I mean, you see women who wear certain things that eliminate a lot of their unwanted looks. They position things just right for that certain look, and guys do it too, just in different ways. But I want to stress though is what you're seeing in a lot of these people is water loss, not fat loss. You know, when you cut carbs, you are decreasing your glycogen, which is your energy stores for your body. Low glycogen means less water in your body. You're storing less water because 1 gram of glycogen, 1 little gram of glycogen, holds about 3 grams of water. So if you're cutting out tons of carbs, 100, 200, 300 grams of carbs in a day, then yeah, you're going to lose some water weight. You're going to lose a bit of that water on you. So yeah, they might look tighter in the moment, but you didn't just magically burn 3 pounds in 2 days. You know, that's not 3 pounds of fats. That's 3 pounds of majority water. Now let's talk about what carbs actually do for you based on the science. Athletes, carbs are huge. Number one, let's look at performance. You know, carbs break down into glucose, which gets stored as that glycogen I just talked about in your muscles, yes, and also in your liver. That glycogen is what fuels high intensity movement. So when you think of sprinting, jumping, lifting, cutting, again, a lot of what these football players are doing and what our lacrosse players about to do, That glycogen is what fuels high intensity movement, sprinting, jumping, lifting, and cutting. Any of that explosive type movement that you want, you are not going to be able to do as well if you have low glycogen stores, low energy stores in your muscles. So low glycogen, low carbs is going to lead to lower exercise capacity. You can't train or perform as hard as you used to. Now here's another thing. You think about, you guys have probably heard like VO2 max. You guys want to improve your VO2 max when we talk about training. High fat diets have not been shown to improve VO2 max. High carb diets have actually been shown to improve VO2 max. So yes, it's smaller amounts, but in general, you're going to have better luck improving that VO2 max by consuming carbs, not excessive amounts of fats. And side note, high VO2 max also reduces risk of death. Like those who have high VO2 maxes, they show less death overall. So side note on that. But just in summary, no carbs equals no gas in the tank. You're going to feel flat, you're going to feel sluggish, and you're going to be slower off the line. You are not going to perform the way that you are capable of performing. Number 2 is it protects your muscle. You know, I really want you guys to listen to this one. When carbs are low, your body can make its own glucose through what's called gluconeogenesis. But that glucose, it comes from mostly your muscles. Your body starts converting amino acids from muscle, from protein, into glucose for energy. You know, gluconeogenesis pulls around half of its fuel, half of that glucose from your muscle breakdown, not fat. So while you're trying to cut, your body is actually eating the muscle you're working so hard to build. Now, some studies show that, yeah, if you get enough protein in the day, then you can protect some of that muscle loss and you use some of the protein that you're eating for that energy. But why would you want to use protein in inefficient form of energy for energy, something that breaks down longer over time so you don't actually get to use it right away? Why would you use that when you can just have carbs to better perform and better show up for your workouts? Like it doesn't make sense to me. Why would we just eat a bunch more protein just for that protein to be broken down into glucose, which carbs could just be used for glucose? And carbs are much more efficient and much more likely to show better performance. You're going to have better performance with them. And they're more readily available and they don't release any extra nitrogen or other things that protein does. So again, it just makes more sense. Let's use carbs for fuel. Let's use protein to build muscle. Let's use fat as long-term fuel and as other things in the body. But yeah, we don't need to eliminate carbs. Like, again, it just doesn't make sense. You know, studies show that when consuming the same amount of calories, so if you're doing low carb versus just low calorie in general, that both are eating 1,500 calories, they have similar amounts of fat loss. So you could be consuming 1,500 calories with very, very low carb, or you could have 1,500 calories with a little bit of carbs to fuel your workouts and still lose the same amount of fat. So which one would you rather have? No carbs or very little carbs, or would you rather have some carbs to fuel your workouts and then let the protein and the fat fill the rest? So again, that just big picture there. Number 3, though, is it does boost recovery. Carbs post-training helps refill that glycogen stores, helps refill your glycogen stores, helps to refill that gas tank and promote recovery. So if you're just consuming protein post-workout, you're already starting that next session behind. You're already starting that next game, that next workout, especially when we look at, once again, those 2 days right across the way from here. It's going to be very hard to perform at a high level in that second workout or in that next day's workout or game if you are not consuming those carbohydrates. You are not going to recover as well, and your performance is going to suffer. I'm going to give you guys an athlete example here in a little bit just to give you guys, paint that picture here. But number 4 is it supports hormones. You know, yes, fats are really important for a lot of our hormones, but carbs also have been shown to help regulate hormones like leptin and thyroid hormones. So I want to highlight, number 1, that these are huge for metabolism and for energy, but we also look at leptin. So leptin is a hunger hormone, and it's shown that low leptin is connected with more hunger, slower metabolism, less fat loss. In general, you're not going to be burning fat as effectively long-term. You know, it's going to hurt your metabolism long-term if you have low leptin. And low carbs are associated with low leptin. So we want more moderate carbs so that we're not cutting out that leptin. Now, again, I want to give you guys this athlete example here. So Austin is a kid that I hugely respect. He's barely even a kid anymore. He's off to college, but he came to me wanting to lean out. And when we looked at what he was eating, He was training hard. He was driving a couple hours a day to do his training, to do his workouts. He was consuming very low amount of carbs before the workouts, in between the workouts, because he was doing 2 of them many days, and then post workout as well. He was not consuming a lot of carbs. He was checking the protein box, maybe getting some fats, maybe getting a little bit of carbs, but it was not enough to match what training he was doing. And what happened was the next day, the days after that, those next workouts, he was not able to perform as well. So if you think about it, yeah, he was just more sore. He was more tired, more fatigued. And so he wasn't able to perform the way that he should. And so even though he was checking protein boxes, he was not able to perform well. Once we started working together, I actually told him, you need to eat more carbs. What we did was we made sure we got him some solid carbs before workouts, some solid carbs in between those workouts, and then some solid carbs post workout. And what do you know? He had more energy, more strength, more speed, and his body composition started to improve from there. And he's continuing to work on that. It's an ongoing process there, but he has made a huge jump in his energy levels, his strength, his speed, and just his overall performance. So again, you can lean out the right way with carbs. It's not about cutting them. It's about timing them properly around your workouts. All right. So I want to highlight, just to paint a fuller picture here, I want to give you guys a full breakdown of why cutting carbs backfires. So let's break down, the short term all the way up to the long term effects. So short term wise, you are going to lose some water weight. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to lose some water weight when you cut out carbs. It's just going to happen. So if you think that you are burning fat because you lost 2 pounds in a couple days, it's like, no, you just lost some water. If you're trying to gain muscle and you just happen to not eat as much carbs, then yeah, you're not necessarily losing muscle because you lost weight. You probably still, once again, lost some water weight. Short term as well as more cramping. If you are not consuming enough carbs, carbs basically helps the absorption of electrolytes. And again, if you're not having enough glycogen stores, you're not having as much water storage. So you're more likely to be dehydrated. You're more likely to, cramp during those more intense sessions because you do not have enough water or electrolytes in your body. You might look leaner temporarily. You might feel more shredded in the short term. But again, it's mostly visual, not actual performance based. It's not actual reality. Medium term. So if we look at medium effects, like somewhere, weeks to maybe months, your strength's going to start plateauing. Boston was an example of this. He was not able to get stronger. I've had a few athletes where they try to cut out too fast and their strength plateaus. They lose speed and explosiveness because, hey, they're not getting the carbs in to be able to fuel those workouts. Yeah, they're not going to be as fast or explosive. Your recovery is going to slow, which means you're going to be more likely to get injured, you're more likely to fatigue faster, etc. And then on the mental side, your mood may drop. You might have more cravings if you're severely cutting out carbohydrates. And so you have more cravings, you're more likely to dip into the sugars, the chips, etc. And then on the long-term effects, muscle loss. Yeah, if you're not able to lift as much, if you're getting weaker in the gym, yeah, you're probably losing muscle. Your hormones might be getting thrown off, which also is going to impact you in many different ways, in performance-wise and health-wise. You may actually lose some ability to absorb iron as well. So iron is really key. Carbs can actually, low-carb diets can actually impact your ability to absorb iron. And so if you're not absorbing iron, that impacts a lot of things, including your energy, your oxygen availability. So again, back to endurance and overall performance long-term, you're not going to be able to perform as well. You're going to be higher risk for sickness. You're going to be more likely to burn out and want to quit. Your injury risk is going to go much higher. Low-carb diets also associated with more bone loss. And so we really got to be careful with that. And then we also have, the last one is increased risk for REDS or RED-S, which is relative energy deficiency syndrome. Sorry, I'm throwing a lot of terms at you guys. You guys can Google these later, ChatGPT these later. But essentially, REDS is a whole nother can of worms. It's a whole nother thing that you guys do not want to be dealing with because it's going to limit your ability to perform. It's going to limit your ability to focus. You're not going to be enjoying life as much. You're going to be really struggling. So, talked a lot about the warnings, a lot of the negative. Let's talk about what to do instead. Adjust your carbohydrate intake based on your training load. Yes, you can eat slightly less on rest days, but don't eliminate carbs. Still have some carbs, ideally maybe at breakfast. We don't need to go as hard on carbs, but we should, dial them back a little bit. It should be based on your training. If you have a higher, you're doing 2 a days, you're doing conditioning, you're doing more intense training, then yeah, you're going to need to eat more carbs. If it's just a lift day, then yeah, maybe just for an hour lift day, yeah, maybe you just need a little bit of carbs. You don't need to go as crazy, but you should still get some carbs if you want to perform well in that workout. Timing is key though. You guys want to make sure that your priority is pre and post workout, especially. So pre workout, make sure that your number one priority is carbs 60 to 90 minutes before, and even maybe 30 minutes before. Like for me this morning, I had a banana before my lift, and then I had some electrolytes with sugar during my lift. And then post training wise, you also want to be prioritizing carbs. You actually need more carbs post workout than you do protein. You know, Boston's mistake was he wasn't getting hardly anything. So he started doing protein smoothies where he's getting the fruits, he's getting all sorts of things to get those carbohydrates, refill that gas tank up, support muscle repair, and to really help him bounce back stronger the next day. Number three, though, is the types of carbs. You know, don't get me wrong, it can be helpful to reduce the amount of carbs you have in the day. It might be. You might already not be eating enough, so that could be your issue. But it could also be, hey, maybe we're reducing the amount, but we're improving the quality. Because there's a lot of carbs that we don't need. You know, chips and candy, soda especially. Like soda is one of the ones that I'm like, nobody needs that, like ever. But like sugar and chips and things like that, like just straight like candy and whatnot, yeah, we don't need a bunch of that. But we do need whole grains, you know, whole wheat breads, rices, quinoa, oats, fruits, potatoes, sweet potatoes. All of those have a great role in your fueling, in your performance, in your health. We just got to time them right. We just got to make sure that we're intentional about eating more of those guys and less of the other guys. You know, when we talk about having carbs for breakfast, even on off days, stick to the fruits, stick to some of the whole grains. Have some of those, and you're going to be less likely to gravitate towards the chips and the candy and all those other things. So you can reduce cravings by eating carbs. Let's just eat the carbs that fuel you versus the carbs that are going to make you go up and right back down. Now, number 4, don't confuse bloat with fat. You know, again, cutting carbs and salt can make you look leaner, or it can maybe give you a quick drop in water weight so you can make weight for wrestling. But you didn't actually lose fat, you just lost fuel, you lost water. And so I want to speak specifically to my wrestlers here. Like, if you are going into a competition and you cut out carbs and you cut out hydration so that you could make weight, you are also cutting out fuel. You are also potentially cutting out performance. So really be careful with that and really think about, how can I get my weight to a point where I don't have to cut that much? Maybe a couple pounds, sure, whatever. But if you're cutting like 5-10 pounds in a very short amount of time, you're gonna sacrifice perform. So yeah, you might have won state, you might have done some great thing in wrestling, but you could even be better than you are right now if you learned how to cut the right way. And then number 5, fuel to perform, not just to look. You know, a lot of athletes are chasing the six pack, but here's the deal: not every athlete would benefit from a six pack. Some athletes actually would be better off not having a six pack when it comes to overall performance. Yeah, you might have guys like DK Metcalf and it works, but you also got guys like Patrick Mahomes who got nowhere near a six pack and he still performs at a high level. You know, it's knowing your role, it's knowing what you need and understanding, like, yeah, you need some fuel in the tank. You need some storage that you can tap into during those long games, especially if you're playing both sides of the ball. But again, if you truly want to lean out and be better at your sport, you need to eat. You need some structure in how you eat, and you need to address the timing. You know, it's timing is really going to make a huge difference in how you perform while still being able to lean out. That's why I emphasize the pre-workout, the post-workout. And breakfast would be great too to get those carbs in, because if you get them at breakfast, you're less likely to crave them when you get to school and you got chips, donuts, whatever thrown your way. So just to wrap up here, like, cutting out carbs might give you a temporary shredded look. It might temporarily help you make weight, but it's going to cost you strength, recovery, and even your full potential. You will not play at your full potential if you are severely cutting out carbs. I don't care what your goal is right now. If you're trying to lean out, there is a way to lean out without eliminating carbs. And not even to mention, I know you guys don't really care about health right now, you're going to have some health issues down the line if you are completely cutting out carbs. So let's not. Now, if anyone wants to come at me with the fat is king argument that carbs are the devil, I've got more research and more real life examples to support the carbs are king argument, both for health and for performance. Fuel to perform, fuel to grow. And if you do it right, your body composition will follow. Now, if you need help cutting weight in a way that doesn't decrease your performance, text CUT to 253-470-2423 and let's chat. Check my show notes down below, the caption down below. You guys will get my number. You guys will get my Instagram. You can message me on there as well. But if you want to perform the way that you're capable of, if you want to still do that while leaning out as well, then you've got to have the right path to success. Not something from some middle-aged man, not something from some bodybuilder who doesn't understand athlete performance. You need it from somebody who knows how to get results and help you perform at the way you should. Lastly, make sure you guys share this. You guys know you have a friend who is cutting out carbs severely and it's impacting their performance. You may have a coach. You may have somebody else that needs to hear this. If you want your team to perform the way it should, if you want your team to make state or win a championship, then they need to hear this stuff. So make sure you share this with them, leave a review, and as always, keep striving for greatness.